bringing in the man that I have affectionately termed our house epidemiologist. He is a professor at the University of Ottawa, Raywat Deonandan. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, as always.
You've had a chance to look over this study. What is it telling us ultimately about mask usage?
It tells us what we already knew in the population health field, that every little bit helps. And like the hand washing, like the distancing, the mask wearing is one more weapon in our arsenal. In and of itself, it doesn't solve the problem, but when combined with these other public health measures, it really helps on reducing the rate of transmission and may, in fact, help us prevent a second wave. It's that powerful.
And so how has this new, I guess, research come about? Because, and obviously it's a new virus, so we're going to keep learning more about it every single day. But it's really interesting to me how we started off saying, don't worry about a mask, and that message really has shifted over the last few months.
Right. So the reason that there was hesitancy around mask wearing early on was a paradigm issue. Let me explain that. So who wears masks? Doctors, surgeons, nurses wear masks, and they learn to use masks by working in hospitals where infection is common. And so they're in high infection areas where to protect themselves, they have to wear a mask. But at the population level, that doesn't matter as much. At the population level, what matters is, can we, on average, reduce the rate of transmission? So it's not so much about protecting yourself, which is what the original conceptualization of mask wearing was all about. It's about protecting other people. Once that switch in thinking happened, then everyone got on board and realized, oh, that's the secret here. So even though poor masks, cloth masks that are kind of like multi-micron width, the virus tends to go through them. Even though they're not great, when used by enough people, the droplets don't go very far. So again, at a population level, the transmission rate comes down. This has never been about individual risk and individual protection. It's always been about community risk. That little change in thinking is all it took.
And it gives you an opportunity to really express your personality with the mask.
Yes, absolutely. It's become a whole new fashion thing, and all new Facebook companies have propped up. It's actually pretty amazing watching how we've thought about face covering so differently now.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully it breaks down some barriers as well and teaches us about different cultural practices. There's so many ways you could spin how all of this has come out. But as we continue to learn about the virus, Raywat, and as we try to open up our society as we're trying to do, I think we've had a lot of fear because we've been told for so long, stay home, stay home, stay home. So then people were afraid to go to the grocery store. People are afraid to go to their local restaurant. And, of course, we know that a lot of travelers brought COVID-19 back with them as they came back from their winter vacations. And so as airlines and airports start to gear up, we were listening to a report of all the different measures that they're undertaking at Pearson with different spraying techniques and all of these kinds of things. Do we actually know if there were cases of transmission that happened on airplanes between people that didn't know one another? You're in an enclosed space for hours at a time. Do we know if there's been transmission? Should people be afraid of flying?
It will shock you to know how little we know about most things around this disease. So not only do we not know exactly if someone has ever become infected by sitting next to somebody on a plane, we don't even know if anyone has become infected by touching a surface touched by someone else who was infected. These are all theoretically possible, but we don't know if it actually happened. And so we err on the side of caution by protecting ourselves against the theoretically possible. What we do know is that SARS-1, the disease that struck the world 17 years ago, that's very similar to this one, definitely spread via people interacting on a plane. So if that's any indication, it is probably happening here as well. So most of the modeling suggests that if you sit more than 2 rows away from an infected person on a plane, you're probably fine. If you don't go to the bathroom, you're probably fine. In fact, they say that if you take your window seat and don't move for the entire flight, it's really unlikely you're going to be exposed to anything infectious on that plane. Having said that, if the person next to you is infected and they're leaning into your space and talking at you for the full 2 hours of your flight, then your risk goes up substantially. But remember, this is a disease of respiratory droplets, and it takes a prolonged amount of intimate conversation and exposure to really guarantee an infectious dose. So we have to take our precautions, wear a mask on a plane, wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear glasses if you can, and if you don't have to go to the bathroom, don't go to the bathroom, and you're probably fine.
Well, and I'm just thinking from a practical perspective here. You mentioned, things like don't go to the bathroom or try not to I guess, interact with too many objects in the plane. And certainly for our domestic flights, that is easily doable. But when you're talking about international travel, I mean, asking someone not to go to the washroom for 7-8 hours, that's where the real challenge comes in.
Yes, and to be frank, maybe we shouldn't be doing casual international travel until there's a vaccine or until this thing is really under control. But also, there really isn't a lot of evidence that this disease has spread by bathrooms or by touching things. There really isn't. I mean, again, it's theoretically possible. So I think that risk is quite low. But if you want to be 100% safe, then avoid those things. So if you're on a multi-hour flight and you have to go to the bathroom, go to the bathroom. Just don't touch anything, and definitely don't touch your face. The key here is to avoid touching your face and your eyes. That's how this thing enters our bodies, through the mucous membranes of our face.
And at the end of the day, if you do, that's when the good hand hygiene comes in. And I think what the positive message in all of this is, yes, it is possible that it potentially has spread on an airplane, but we certainly haven't seen a case that they could say, aha, on that plane, 200 of the 300 people on board were infected. So there's certainly good news in all of this.
There's a lot of good news, absolutely. And it brings us back to the mask wearing. The one thing we do know is that this disease spreads by huge mass indoor gatherings via people breathing on each other. And if you all wear masks, then that risk comes down substantially. So I have faith that we can get this under control if everyone wears a mask and avoids large indoor gatherings. I see good trends in general. A lot of people don't, but I do. And I have faith that we'll have some semblance of normalcy sooner rather than later. We shouldn't let our guard down, obviously, but we shouldn't also panic.
And I guess, as we look at the trends and as we look towards the future, I think the one question when it comes to this, a pressing question anyway on everyone's mind, is the second wave of COVID-19. Raywat, how concerned are you about that second wave?
I'm always going to be concerned. And the reason is, in Canada, we have maximum 5% of the population who have been infected, which means 95% are still susceptible. So long as we have a susceptible population, we have the strong likelihood of a second wave. So it's not a matter of if, it's when. But, as I've said many times, if we do our public health job right, that second wave doesn't have to be noticeable. It can be a very small peak and delayed quite substantially. Also, I have to say that there's something around a category of coronaviruses, like the first SARS or MERS. It kind of just went away for reasons we don't fully understand. So if we're hopeful, this one might go away as well. But we can't bank on that. That's why we have to take these steps. The second wave comes about again because mathematically the majority of people are still susceptible. And as long as that's the case, then we have to pretend as if the second wave is inevitable.
Well, like you, Raywat, Dr. Fauci, very optimistic today, saying he thinks that there will be a vaccine by the end of the year or early 2021. You agree?
That's compelling news, right? I'm surprised, but not surprised at the same time. So many vaccines, about 100 vaccines are being trialed around the world, and everyone's pulling out all the stops to make it happen. The rate-limiting step is not the science. The rate-limiting step has been the administration, getting it through the proper safety trials. If you forego those safety trials, you could get a vaccine to market relatively quickly, but there'd be some dangers associated with it. So I'm invigorated to hear that people are taking the proper steps, and I'm hearing some good whisperings about the efficacy of some of the vaccines being trialed. What we don't know yet is what are the health consequences, the safety consequences, and the absolute efficacy across the board. So I have no insights beyond what we read in the news that Dr. Fauci says, but I'm an optimist by nature, and I have to think that if he's saying it, there's probably something behind it. I just hope it's not a marketing push and is actually based on science.
Fingers crossed, and until then, we'll wear our fancy masks. Raywat Deonandan, University of Ottawa epidemiologist, our house epidemiologist, joining us here to 647 on 680 CJOB.